Hi, I'm Steve Schultz with Elijah List Ministries. I'm here with my beautiful wife, Doreen. Say hello, Doreen.
Hello. Welcome to our home.
Yeah. We decided we wanted to shoot a video for you. You know, if you can see what we have here, we got cameras lined up and lights and everything, but you are seeing the beautiful shot out of our window. We want to talk to you about how God provided this house. I think we're in our 18th year in this home. It started as an old farmhouse. It still is kind of, but we got to remodel it, and there's lots of miracle stories that we won't have time to get into today. But there's one story in particular about how God provided this home that we wanted to share with you because we share it from time to time where we go, and it's quite the miracle story. It will build your faith because it'll show to the great detail how God can provide for you over the period of literally years, and how he puts this piece together and that piece together. So I'm just going to jump into this. You are looking out our front room window here. You see the beautiful acreage. We are sitting on 20 acres. There's actually a vineyard out there. We own the land that you're looking at, but we've actually leased the land to someone else who's built a vineyard. Yeah. But we're just loving the gorgeous view, and so I want to share this story with you. So more than 18 years, since we've been here that long, more than 18 years ago, our kids would always pray, Lord, please one day give us a house, a home in the country. And they would pray that night after night, year after year.
Too.
And Doreen would pray too. And I would agree to it. But you know, it looked pretty much undoable. Well, we had reached a point where my business was failing. This is like 1997. It was literally failing. And I'll tell the whole story about the Elijah List on another clip, but God then began to build the ministry of the Elijah List. But I needed to work some more in order to make ends meet, and the Lord provided a job 2 hours south of where we used to live, and here we are 2 hours south. But we couldn't find a home. My daughter, Tanya, our oldest, had a horse that we were boarding, but we needed a place to put a horse. And no, we couldn't afford that kind of place. We were pretty poor. In fact, just before we moved here, people were putting groceries on our doorstep. Is that right?
Yeah.
It was a hard time. Yeah. But we needed to work, so I was commuting for a while, a couple hours, and then I'd stay here for a couple days. It's tough. But I couldn't find a house, especially not one with a place for a horse. So where I was living, my boss there at the time said, well, why don't you just put an ad in the paper and tell people what you're looking for? Well, I'd never heard of doing that. You look for a place that's available. I've never heard of putting an ad in the paper that says, hi, this is what I want. But I decided to do that as an act of faith, as an act of obedience. So I put an ad in the paper that said, hey, Christian businessman looking to locate to this area, looking for a house big enough for a horse. And the whole time, I think that ad was in there a couple of weeks, we got one call.
Yep.
One call. And the call was from the owner from this house, describing their house to us, the house that we are now sitting in 18 years later. And I began to describe it on the phone while I was still on the phone. So I'm saying, what? 20 acres? You have 20 acres? What? You have a place for a horse? What? 4 bedrooms and 2-story? Really? You got a view? You're on a hill? We couldn't afford a place like that. And I'm going, what? You have 2 donkeys that we can keep? 2 pet donkeys that are these little things? And what? There's a lake on the property. There's like a pond, a big pond. There's like a mini lake with a canoe. And I'm saying this out loud. My kids are hearing that. I'm watching these smiles break out. Well,
I had a prayer list tucked in my Bible of all the things that I wanted in a home in the country. He was checking off every single...
Without realizing
it. The bay window was one of them, and fruit trees, and place to garden, and a skylight in our bathroom, a room that each of the kids would like.
And see, I didn't know about this list. I didn't know. If I do, I just was saying it out loud so they could hear. Well, make that long story short, we get in the car and drive out here, and a few days later, and it's like everything. The kids ran upstairs, and they each picked their own room, and there was no disagreement. They each decided which room they would want if this was available.
That's miraculous.
Yeah, so it was miraculous. So we went into a rental situation. They loved us. We loved the property. And I was so thrilled that they would pick us, and we had enough money for the rent, but not to buy. We kind of then talked about that we'd like to buy someday, but we went into a rental situation. Mm-hmm. And a short time after that, I went on a trip and did a conference with James Gall. We did a conference with James Gall, and he gave me a word. He didn't know anything about this miracle story. He's from this stage there in Michigan, and he says, Steve, I got a word for you. He says, I see an inheritance coming to you from the 4th generation on your mother's side. And I thought, well, that's a weird word, because my mother's side was poverty-stricken, completely poverty-stricken. I mean, abject poverty, down the line. I mean, you could do comedy shows with showing the poverty level on that show. Because, I mean, I'm not dissing the people at all, but there was just like lots of poverty, just like, poverty. So I received the word. I came back and I was do some genealogical research trying to find generations on my mother's side, and I stumbled across this person who had died with that name. And our family line is not the Chase line; it's the Kings and the Schultzes. But I discovered that there was someone by the name that there was a line called Chase, the last name Chase, and so had died in Albany, Oregon, which is a few miles away from here, where the Elijah List office is. Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm looking off camera to some of the people who are the camera people who are listening to the story, and I'm just like telling them the story at the same time. So. I was just fascinated with that there would be someone from the 4th generation, how that would relate to us buying this house, so I kind of forgot about that. And then we went into a lease with an option, and then a couple more years later, it was time for us to buy this house, literally at the closing of the house. We're sitting at the dining room table, which is right around the corner from this camera. Mm-hmm. We're sitting at the dining room table, and we're ready to close on this thing, and here's the owners, and here's us, and because I'm a talkative sort of guy, I was telling them this story. They're believers, but I don't know how much they would believe in this kind of thing, a word from the Lord. So I told them the story about that there's people that actually turned out to be on our side of the family. There's no Kings or Schultzes or any other names that have been in Oregon, that resided in Oregon, that were from Oregon. So this was a bizarre thing to find any relative on either side. So as we're closing across the table, Kathy was the name of the woman name of the owner, and she said, well, what is the name of this person you found who died? And I said, well, his name happens to be George Russell Chase. And she said, the Chases? And I said, yeah, the Chases. She said, well, the Chases were very prominent in this area. They're extremely prominent. In fact, they financed our farm, which is a little few miles away from here, and then with those finances, they financed, in essence, they financed this house that you are now buying across the table. And our jaw is dropping. Yeah. Here's the 4th generation, the Chases, on my mother's side, who instead of being poverty were well-heeled, extremely wealthy family. They ended up financing this house, and as we're closing the deal, we're really realizing that, you heard the expression, he bought the farm? Well, we bought the farm, in essence, from the Chases, the 4th generation, on my mother's side. And it's just fantastic. There's just fantastic, people call it a coincidence, coincidence. No, there are no coincidences in the kingdom of God. There's no coincidence. I'm gonna add this part about the white thing. I'm gonna this is a stretch, because we want you to know about the prophetic and angels. I mean, people have driven by this property who didn't know us, didn't know we were here, and then when they found out later, they'd say, I just drove by that property the other day off of I won't say the highway, and there's angels, masses of angels over that property. Mm-hmm. And we'd always pray for angels for, I'd say more than a decade. Our kids would always say, protect us with angels, protect us with angels. Yeah. Lord, send angels. And then people would give us words, and they say, you have no idea how many angels are around your property. Is that right? Yeah. And there's lots of stories with it. But I want to tell this one, because in the prophetic, you're always getting words that you don't know what they mean. People would get these words about the White House, right? In the White House, I'd say, yeah, right, the White House, And, even today we get some of those words. You're going to have, ability, people will listen to you at the White House. Who knows what those words are? And you receive them, you try to have faith, and you look for signs and wonders. And so we had moved in here. We've been here for a year or two, and the neighbors down, so we're on 20 acres, right? This is a 20-acre property surrounded by hundreds of acres of this Christian heritage. It was, I think the Mennonite was their heritage. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a local lake adjoining this land, and we were invited to the local lake to enjoy a potluck. I don't remember if it was Easter Sunday or a baptism, wasn't it? Okay. So we're at the lake, and they don't know all of our miracle stories, and we're not sure if they believe that. But we're there, and we're talking to people, and we're having a potluck, and one of the older men said, "So, you moved into Kathy's place, huh?" I said, "Yeah, we moved into Kathy's old place." "So you moved into the White House?" And I said, "What? Excuse me?"
It's a pink house.
You live in the White House. And I said, "Say that again. Come again." So they began to tell us just a very short story that, after the war, this had actually been a military base at one time. This was, I won't even name the military base for location purposes, but this is a military base. During the war, they took all this property. After the war, they gave the properties back to the owners, and the whites moved in, built this house or something. So from that time forward, they called it the White House. So here it was, did the prophecy come true, or did the prophecy not come true? We kept getting words. You're going to be in the White House. You're going to have... I could keep telling you more stories about this, but it goes on and on. One time someone gave us a word down in California, and they said, "Well, we don't know anything about your property, but there's an artesian well on your property." And I said, "Yeah, there is an artesian well." "Well, it happens that artesian well has a water table that goes all the way up north into Portland. The Lord wants you to pour anointing oil several times a year, because as you pour anointing oil in this artesian well, it will affect 2 hours from here north, the Portland area." So I'm going, I can do that, So a number of times we've gone up to that artesian well and poured oil in and prayed for the city of Portland. Who knows what lives might be affected or spared or changed, because we obeyed the word. So I could tell you with more stories, but I wanted to build you up and encourage you and tell you the story about when God starts speaking to you, step out in those obediences, do what he said to do, listen for clues, write the clues down, remember the clues, because they'll show up again and again in your story. Well, before we sign off, I wanted to just tell you two quick things that will edify you and also help us. First of all, we're having our 2018 Israel tour. I think it's our third Israel tour, but this is the big one. Lance Wallnau is going to be our featured speaker there, and as we all tie our boats together on the Sea of Galilee and sing worship songs led by Steve Swanson, Lance will then be on the microphone. He'll be talking about the Sea of Galilee as we cross the Sea of Galilee, as we worship there. We'll also be talking about Mount Carmel. Shiloh, we'll be taking you to Shiloh. I said Mount Carmel. The Garden Tomb is one that people like to go to. We'll be doing that. We'll have a baptism in the Jordan River. It's going to be an amazing tour to Israel, so we want you to get in on this right away. There's a link somewhere close by where you're watching this to check out our Israel tour. You can make monthly payments. We're allowing that this time. So if it's a little bit spendy, but if you make monthly payments from here on out, you'll be able to do this next June 5 to 15, which is a 70-year anniversary period. So we want you to come on that. We want you to we're going to be there. We want to get to know you. The other thing, and then before we sign off, is that if you could see this beautiful setup, you'd see the gorgeous cameras that you all purchased to get this going. Yes, we do thank you for that. Down the road a piece, we're negotiating to close on the place where the actual studio will be being built, and these cameras will go there to that studio. We need some more cameras and lights, and we think the next phase is going to cost us something about $100,000. So somewhere where you are watching this, there's a donate button. We really appreciate anything you can do to help us out. We're going to keep bringing you prophetic reports, and some of you have now learned by watching this that Sunil Isaac has joined the team. You remember him from Code Breakers on the Kim Clement team. Kim went home to be with the Lord. He was both of our friends. He was Sunil's friend. He was Doreen's and my friend. We miss him, but I'm sure if he can see this, he's jazzed that Sunil has joined our team. A program that's not called Code Breakers, but it's the same concept. It's called the Decoders or Decoders. So he will be showing you different prophets and their words of revelation and showing you how these things came to pass. It's going to be really, really exciting. So, all right, anything else? I think that's the news. So I hope that encouraged you today, and expect to see us pretty often now going forward. We're going to be encouraging with revelation and stories about revelation, signs, and wonders. All right? Good to talk to you today, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. Hi, I'm Steve Schultz, founder of the Elijah List. I just want to thank you for being a subscriber, joining our family, our team. We are right at 300,000, or very close to 300,000 subscribers now. We started with 30, and here we are very close to 300,000. This year, we hit the 20-year mark of the Elijah List, and it's really exciting times. Thank you, and please get your friends, relatives, anyone you know to subscribe. We are in exciting times. God bless.